Senator, what do you need to see in this bill to be on board?
The problem is it's asking conservatives like myself to raise the debt ceiling $5 trillion. That's historic. No one's ever raised the debt ceiling that much.
It's not beautiful. I'm sorry. It's not a big, beautiful bill. That's called rhetoric.
There's one thing
it's mislabeling.
There's one thing that really
false advertising.
So right there, you have two Republican senators who are, at least as of right now, against Donald Trump's big, beautiful bill, although at least one of them seems to be a little bit confused. Paul right there was talking about how they shouldn't raise the national debt. He seems to think a Democrat's in charge, because that's generally the only time they actually care about that, but I appreciate the consistency in this case. In any event, the bill faced a major hurdle today. Conversation on it is done for the week, and both senators and some Republican representatives seem to have some major misgivings about this bill. Cenk, we're gonna dive into all of it, but what do you think is leading to the fact that they're so willing to push back against him?
Yeah, so there's something super strange going on. We'll solve it over the next couple of weeks, but I've literally never seen this. Those are two Republican senators arguing against a tax cut for the rich. Kind of, for the moment being. But again, over 25 years of covering American politics, I have never ever seen a Republican be against a tax cut for a rich. So in this case, this is unresolvable because they want to give away at least $5 trillion to the rich, but they don't have that much money to cut. So that means they're going to put a huge hole in the debt, and they're going to make it much worse. Normally, what Republicans do is, oh, there is no debt. Not when we're in charge, and the tax cuts will magically create revenue. They won't take away revenue. They just lie through their teeth. They don't actually care about balancing budgets or anything. So in this situation, we've got something super weird going on, which is where Republicans are saying, yeah, this will add to the debt. And so are we sure we should do massive multi-trillion-dollar tax cuts?
Yeah.
I've never seen it before, so I can't explain it. This is a new phenomenon.
Yeah, and so their problem seems to be on the it costing too much side, and then we will get to, there's some Republicans that are on the we're cutting too much side in terms of Medicaid, and others who grotesquely actually want to cut more. So we're gonna get to all of that, but before we jump to the House, let's have a little bit more from the senators about their problem.
It will be a record for Congress to raise the debt $5 trillion, but also it indicates that this year the deficit will be over $2 trillion, but it means they're anticipating close to $3 trillion for the next year. It's really a slap in the face that those of us who are excited about Elon Musk and Doge and all the cuts, where are the cuts? If the cuts are real, why are we going to borrow $5 trillion? If you raise it $5 trillion for 2 years, you just put it on the back burner, but we're going to coast through that money and we're going to spend it all. And that's not what the people want. That's not what our supporters want.
This is not serious. It's exacerbating the problem. It's not solving it. I've got a great video on my X page. All our Republican leaders saying we don't have a revenue problem. We have a spending problem. And this bill is primarily about tax cuts. We can't afford to cut taxes when we're running over $2 trillion a year deficits for the next 10 years as far as the eye can see.
The only correction I would make to that is that they also are likely to have a major revenue problem, because some estimates say that the massive cuts to the IRS could generate up to $500 billion less in taxes. That's the estimates that I've seen. That remains to be seen. We need to figure out what actually happens, but that's the Senate. Over in the House, they did their first vote at the committee level on this bill, and it actually failed in the House Budget Committee. Republicans Chip Roy, Ralph Norman, Andrew Clyde, Josh Brecheen joined the Democrats to vote down the bill. And so at least for now, it has actually failed. Now, there are some Republicans who've been saying, this cuts Medicaid too much. We're worried about the political ramifications of that. Cuts to Medicaid, by the way, are universally reviled. The majority of Republicans are against them, let alone independents and Democrats. But that's not actually why these particular Republicans voted against it. This really, I think, crystallizes the problem that Mike Johnson has, that you have those who are worried about it going too far. And then you have this group that think that it doesn't go far enough. And they have a variety of different concerns, but here are a few of them. One says they want to speed up the phase out of clean energy tax credits enacted under Joe Biden, because we want to really cook this planet as fast as possible. Immediately remove immigrants in the country illegally from any Medicaid access rather than allowing states several years to comply, and moving up the Medicaid work requirement start date. So rather than giving states 4 years to phase this in, make it immediate so that the estimated 9 to 14.5 million people who will be thrown off of Medicaid thanks to this can be thrown off as soon as possible. Don't let them suck off the teat of the government for a couple more years. Throw them out in the streets immediately. Let them start to get sick. Let them start to die. Millions and millions of them being Trump voters. Make that immediate. Really make the cruelty as fast as possible. Anyway, you can see I'm not a big fan of the bill. But anyway, it is suffering a little bit. What do you think?
Yeah, so the polling is gonna show you here why the Republicans have an unsolvable riddle, okay? So we're gonna get to that in a second. First of all, is this really cutting Medicaid? Yeah, 10 million people are gonna be cut off the rolls. Now, think about the paradox they're setting up here. They're saying, well, we understand you might need Medicaid sometimes, and so that's why we have the program. But you know what? We got to make sure though that you're going to work and trying your hardest, because we don't want any giveaways. All right, maybe that sounds reasonable to you, right? And I think in some circumstances, I would say, yeah, after a certain amount of time, et cetera, on some government programs. But on Medicaid, the whole point is, if you can't afford healthcare, we don't want you to die, right? So that's about healthcare, it's not about anything else. So, and that's absolutely critical. They say, now you gotta go get a job. Now the thing is, in one of the provisions here, if you get over $15,000, they start cutting your Medicaid. $15,000 a year is minimum wage. So if you get a job, they kick you off of Medicaid. If you don't have a job, they kick you off of Medicaid.
Perfect system.
Yeah, because you know why? Because they don't give a damn about you. They just care about the rich. So that's why what Rand Paul did this similar line that they usually do. Oh, the real problem is the cuts. We haven't cut from the American people enough to give to my rich donors yet. They're still, stuffing their mouths, and we need to give them a nice big buffet. So we're going to take it from the, most needy. So Rand Paul is like, he's complaining about the debt, but he'll shut up later and he'll pretend that the tax cuts don't create debt. That's my guess. That's what they do, like literally 100% of the time until today. Ron Johnson, maybe he's just a knucklehead. He's not that bright. Maybe he slipped up and said, oh, the tax cuts are too large. He's not supposed to say that. He's supposed to say, oh no, the tax cuts are great. They will create revenue magically. They will trickle on you later. Okay, but he's not saying that, so that's why I'm totally surprised by that. But the rest of the Republicans, as usual, they didn't change at all. You think they're more populist? No, they're not populist. You think that it made any difference at all? No. So for Trump, you can make an argument that he is really trying for peace negotiations. You could make a counter argument, right? But it's debatable. On Republicans in Congress, in my lifetime, including now with the exception of that one Ron Johnson clip, it has been 100% of the time where they say, yeah, no, everything for the rich. The biggest tax cuts you can imagine. And how do we get to the $37 trillion in debt? Largely through tax cuts for the rich and for corporations. That was the #1 reason. Spending was #2. #1 is we just keep giving them massive, massive multi-trillion-dollar tax cuts. You know how much Trump put on the debt last time he was in office? Just 4 years, $8 trillion. The most of any president in history. Now, does the American people know that? And it gets so frustrated because both mainstream media and the Democratic Party. Why didn't you talk about how Trump added $8 trillion to the debt? Why didn't you say that every single time? This idiot added $8 trillion to the debt. 8 out of the 37 out of our entire history by this moron who can't do math and who's so greedy. He gave himself a whole bunch of tax cuts and all of his rich friends a whole bunch of tax cuts and just piled onto the debt. The Democrats instead went, and why? Because they're like, oh, secretly that goes to our donors too. Otherwise you'd fight back. And mainstream media is like, well, Republicans say this, that $5 trillion in tax cuts magically creates revenue instead of costing revenue. And the Democrats say, so the Republicans are right. No, there are actual facts. So we're gonna get to more here in a second, including the polling that's so important. But is it a Medicaid cut? Yes, and my guess, Maz, is what they're gonna do is what they do every single time, which is they'll get to the finish line, there'll be a lot of fighting, some will be real and some will be fake, and then at the end, they'll go, screw the deficit, let's give the rich everything. They're not gonna cut. They're gonna make the deficit lower? No way. They're gonna make the deficit much higher. And that's because they can't wait to pay back the bribes that all the rich people gave them to get elected. Moss.
Well, Cenk, tariffs are going to pay for all this. What are you talking about?
All the tariffs that have been canceled, right?
Exactly. First of all, the national debt, $37 trillion, and I like it. I love the national debt because it makes me feel good about my own debt. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Like, why should we get rid of the national debt? Every time I get my credit card bill end of the month, and I'm like, how much did I spend? And I go, well, this is not 37 trillion. So there's that if you're looking for silver lining. But it's amazing how much they're bending over backwards to find ways to be able to excuse this tax cut they're about to give themselves. And it's interesting how the word cut is used for the poor to cut their programs and benefits. And for the rich, it's used to cut their taxes. And it's crazy where they're saying with the tariffs, they're gonna bring money in. Doge was supposed to cut money. Remember, Elon Musk famously said, I'm gonna cut $2 or $3 trillion in that rally that he was on stage with. I'm gonna cut trillions of dollars. They're nowhere close to cutting that much. And the programs they cut are programs that benefit us and we need, like USAID and other programs that were helping us. And they never look at, for example, defense. They never look at defense because they can't, because to your point, there's way too much money going in their pockets from the defense contractors and from the defense lobbyists. And it's just unbelievable that anyone that is on their side, any constituent that is on their side, that is not a very wealthy person, is not seeing that they're getting taken to the cleaners and that they're coming up with all of these excuses and all of these all this smoke and mirror to make it look like we have money coming in. He goes to the Middle East and says, oh, I'm bringing in whatever, $12 trillion. He's throwing these numbers around so that his constituents will be like, well, he's bringing in money that way. So yeah, let's give the rich another tax break. It is just unbelievable.
So they're working on the details of the exact plan now, but in the first cut of the outline of the bill, they did an analysis on the top 1% was getting what percentage of the tax cuts, let alone the corporate tax cuts, which goes exclusive to corporations, right? Was it like 10%? Well, maybe because the top 1% is wealthier. I get it if it's 10%. 20%, well, that would be pretty disproportionate. 30% would be ridiculous. Yeah, it was 56%. 56% of the cuts go to the top 1%, the rich that don't need it at all. And they're gonna rob real Americans, okay, that desperately need health care when their kids are sick. They're gonna rob them to pay the richest people in the world. And so this is the great American robbery. Now, here's a problem they have. The polling on this is disastrous on the Medicaid part and on the taxes part, but I'll get back to taxes in a second. I want to show you Harry Enton, and then I'm going to show you a hilarious Republican faux pas because of this. But first, look at the polling that he's pointing out here on CNN.
Major spending cuts to Medicaid. Look at this, 76% opposed. You get 95% of Democrats opposed, 79% of independents, and you even get a majority of Republicans, 55% oppose major spending cuts to Medicaid. This, simply put, is not popular on any part of the aisle. Do you know somebody, or you yourself, ever been on Medicaid or on it currently? And this, I think, basically says it all. Has been or is on Medicaid, me or someone else close to me. Look at this, 62% of Democrats, 62% of Republicans. Medicaid is something that touches people from across the political spectrum, from the left to the right.
So that's them going after the average American, and that's why the average American is dead set against this. 3/4 of the country saying don't cut Medicaid. That's why it was important for the Republicans to rebrand this as Medicaid reform. So let's go to video B3 of Congressman Jason Smith and see how that rebranding is coming along.
You can look at Medicaid cuts, the Medicaid reforms, I should say.
We're gonna cut Medicaid. I mean, reform. We're just reforming Medicaid. You know what I'm saying? I mean, we're gonna cut like at least 10 million people out of the rolls, and they'll be reformed into probably massive illnesses and maybe their kids dying. But hey, to be fair, the top 1% needed another $5 trillion. So that's the sick thing that's going on here. So at the end of the day, this is unresolvable. There is no way to cut that much in taxes and to balance the budget. There just isn't enough money. There isn't $5 trillion in the budget to cut. And you can't, just trying to take it out of Medicaid is unpopular. Oh, and last poll for you guys. At least, tax cuts are very popular. I've been told by mainstream media my whole life how popular tax cuts are. And that's why the Democrats have to go along. They don't have a choice. There was nothing they could do. There was nothing they could do, right? So let's see if that's true. Here, this is from Politico, so that sounds right. 76% of registered voters believe the wealthiest Americans should pay more in taxes. More. So reviewing, 76% of Americans say you should not cut Medicaid, and 76% of Americans say you should tax the wealthy more. So instead, the populist Republicans will do the exact opposite. Enjoy. Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.